We're going to be listening to caregivers. And the caregivers are Canon Hyde, Bill Smutney, and Linda Hollingshead. And they're really going to talk amongst themselves, as we say, around the issues that they are living with. They asked me to sit up here. I'm really not a part of this, but they asked me to be here, so I'm here if there's any opportunity to ask a question or remind them of the incredibly wise things they've already said as we prepared for this. So I welcome you to join us in the living room of this little corner while they visit again and talk about the issues that are so rich and challenging and rewarding. So let's start your conversation. If you would just share with us where you are in your journey with dementia.
Y'all are looking at me.
Well, you've been in it longer than we have.
I know. Well, let's see here. Chuck was actually diagnosed in 2005. We knew that we were having some difficulties in 2001, so it has been kind of a long, winding road, but we got into it, and we got into our marriage 33 years before that as a partnership, and we decided that, you know what, this is a long journey. We're going to learn as much as we can about it. We're going to go through the ups and downs, but we're still going to work as partners, and it doesn't matter how long it takes. We're going to keep at it.
And wasn't it Chuck who coined the phrase long time
Yeah,
ago?
well, I thought he did, and now, yeah, it's been a long time, but Chuck actually coined the phrase, I thought, care partners as opposed to caregivers, because when he was first diagnosed, they said, well, you know, you're going to be the caregiver, and I said, what? You know, we've always been partners in everything that we have done. And so he said, you know what, you're my care partner.
Mm-hmm. How about you?
Well, we're kind of the new guys on the block, if you will. My wife's been diagnosed a little over 2 years ago, and before that, it was probably 2 years prior to that we started noticing different symptoms and a few lapses here and there. As I like to say, it's the little things that were happening and started to add up, and everything from where she was always, she was an interior designer, and where she could walk into a room and see colors and textures and furniture placements. All of a sudden, she started second guessing herself, and little things like her GPS system and giving me directions in the car, which really annoyed me, actually. But the truth of the matter, it annoyed me because she was always right. But that started to kind of break down. And so by themselves, the little things, nothing. But when you took a step back and started to notice, they added up. And then we got the diagnosis.
Mm-hmm. We moved here almost 7 years ago, and actually we both have talked about how we even noticed some symptoms while we were still living up in Louisville before we moved here to North Carolina, but we had been seeing things that we knew weren't right, and fortunately James wasn't denying the symptoms that he had, and we thought maybe it was something physical, and so instead of starting out at memory care, we started over at the medical school over at Winston, thinking that we needed to go find out what was wrong medically. And this may sound kind of strange to you all, but actually, by the time we finally got the diagnosis, when Dr. Sink left the room, we looked at each other and we said, you know, it's a relief, because we didn't know, were we imagining things or exaggerating things? We just couldn't make sense of it. And actually, in a strange sort of way, when she told us, it was like, oh, okay. And not that we weren't overwhelmed and shocked, but at least we knew what we were dealing with. And so in that way, it was kind of a relief and a help. Fortunately, when he was diagnosed, the doctor spent a lot of time with us. It was a very, very positive experience. But then about a year after that, we switched over to memory care because I was having trouble dealing with all the changes, and I knew they could work with the families and So that's where we've been going since then.
Well, speaking of changes, can you talk a little bit about the changes and how you move to be accepting of the changes and be able to move with them?
Well, I think for me, it goes back to the thread that you all were talking about. And I guess I look back, and my thread is the stability and strength of my mother. She had a lot to deal with throughout her 93 years. And I always told her, I don't know where she got all of her strength. She says, Linda, you deal the cards that were dealt. I mean, you play the cards that were dealt to you. And that's exactly what I've been doing. It is what it is. But I think that through that, I think that I have been able to, grow along with the whole situation with Chuck's help. Chuck has been a wonderful, he's my supporter, he's my cheerleader, and he's the wind beneath my wings kind of thing. And the changes, really, we've tried not to have a lot of changes. We've tried to keep our lives as much as we could on the straight and narrow that we have, albeit with of course, some, curves here and there. But we've learned over the years to work with the curves. And it's still a day-by-day process, and I don't do everything perfectly, but boy, I think we've both come a long way. And there's a lot to learn, a lot to go through, but no more fear, anger, it's nothing. It's just an acceptance and you dealing with it. For us, because our marriage has always been so close.
You know what helped me was at first I was thinking, oh no, here's another problem. And it just got to where it was so overwhelming because at first there seemed to be so many changes. And then I started, I don't know if it was something I read or something somebody said to me, but I started trying to look at it in terms of challenges rather than problems. Because I was brought up that if you have a challenge in your life, you just face into it. And that really did, that seems like a minor thing, but it really did help me to start looking at it as, well, now what can we do about this? And not that I don't still have moments when I'm thinking, oh no. But for the most part, if you do look at it more as a challenge, then you're out there wanting to learn more. You're wanting to go to meetings like this, learn as much as you can. You're wanting to connect to other people who are going through it. And it has really helped me to look at it that way.
Yeah, there's so much, everything is changing. As I think we talked about before, the only thing constant in the whole process is change. And everything is changing from our roles that we have in a normal day-to-day life and marriage, and it's just all kind of topsy-turvy. But and that presents us with the challenges that we face. And for me, the biggest challenge that I face is changing myself, and that's what I have to do because Laura can't. Laura is in a maze, I call it, of trying to find her way through that maze, and she can't help necessarily what's going on or really do things about that. But I can. I can do things that make her life easier or make it more acceptable or comfortable, and that's what I have to do. And I find that my patience has grown exponentially. My just things that I never thought that I would be able to do, I'm able to do. You kind of rise to that level and you rise to the challenge.
Tell them what you've done about the blog that you've started, because that's just such a healthy way to deal with the challenge.
Well, that is a catharsis. I do have a blog that I write, and it's just kind of about our daily, not necessarily daily, but I post about once a week, give or take. And it's just a catharsis for me that I can write down my feelings, or sometimes Laura explains to me what's going on. One of my favorite is a little image that she gave about when she gets stuck for a word or gets stuck in the middle of a thought process. She she couldn't, she was struggling for it. And so when she finally gave up one time, I said, what's that like? Is it just, do you see like a blank screen? And she said, no. She said, I see it's like a bunch of fish. And she used her hands to help with the image. She just said, there's just like a giant school of fish and the fish are all swimming around. And I said, well, what are those fish? Are they different words that you're trying to choose? And she said, no, they're everything. It's color, it's thoughts of what I have to do later on today, it's words, it's you name it, it's all those things. And I have to pick the right one. And I said, I just can't even imagine what that's like. And she said, and then when somebody interrupts, whether they're trying to be helpful or trying to be funny or just whatever, it's like you drop a stone in the water and the fish are all gone. And then it's blank. And that was an aha moment for me, because again, my patience is not always good, or I try to be too helpful and I try to fill in the blanks if she's struggling. Now I know, wait, give her time. And just wait. So
I think that's one of the most beautiful teaching images that I've heard. And I have put Bill's blog on the bibliography in your packet and encourage you all to read, because Laura and Bill work together. It's a great educational tool. There's a number of things that she shared with him that he then beautifully describes. It's an extremely helpful way to learn about what it's like.
thank you.
So you mentioned challenges. So let's talk about some of the challenges.
To encourage physical activity without over-encouraging, to provide stimuli without over-stimulating, to control situations without over-controlling them. That's a little bit of a balance problem then. And so I find myself just defining a situation, defining a relationship, a time when we're together, and then I'll have to think and redefine that same thing and try something else the next time. But I think the key is to keep trying. You know, if we just let be what will be, I think neither one of us would grow. And fortunately for me, he's been, he's like my rock. And so if I get it too far out of control, I kind of will hear it. But his sense of humor is unbelievable. We were riding here today, and I just said something about, oh, gee, it's crowded. The roads are crowded. And I said, yeah, there's going to be a marathon, the Asheville Marathon today. And he said, oh, gee, I don't have time to go home and change my clothes. I don't think I'll run today. I mean, crazy little things like that. He has a sign before I go out, and I don't know where he got this sign, from some kind of an ad somewhere, but when I leave the garage, go out to the garage door and get into my car, on the door before I go is, today is Chuck Hollinshead's day. I don't know where he got that, but he wants to remind me that this is his day. So that's good. If he has a problem with something, like a pen or something that he can't quite write with, he puts it in a little bag and gives me a little note. He says, you know what, I love this pen. What I don't like is it won't write. Can you help? I mean, how can you not, And when I lose my patience, I just... But it's just, it's part of the whole process. So I think that what I have to do is to just, be grateful for the wonderful times that he does make me smile and laugh, and those are a lot.
You made an important point about the sense of humor, because we do have so many challenges, and you have to be able to laugh about it. James heard this story, but one day James was in the bathroom shaving, and we got a phone call from some friends, and they were changing their plans. And James does much better if we don't change around with plans, if we try to keep things pretty well, organized in the way we said we were going to do them. But I went flying in the bathroom, and I said, oh, honey, the Garvers called, and they can't come tonight, but they think maybe they can come tomorrow night. And I was just... And he put his razor down, and he looked at me, he said, Cannon, I can shave, or I can listen to you. But I can't do both. And he said, if I do, I'm going to cut my throat. So it was a not so subtle reminder of a challenge I think we all deal with, and that is that our partners do better if we're not constantly interrupting, changing. Oh, listen to this. And that was a big adjustment for me because, as some of you may know, I'm pretty talkative, and I'm always, oh, I've got this idea. And he's over there, trying to read something, and it just totally throws him off. And I've had to learn to be a little more subdued, which isn't easy for me, but that's been one of our big challenges because I do have to be more respectful of not pushing James into a point where he has to multitask, because multitasking is very challenging. Not interrupt him when he's thinking one thing, not change the subject. All that kind of thing that, I'd kind of been going through life like this, and I'm learning not to do that anymore.
Yeah, it's the hard part of changing our behavior that's the tough part. I mean, things that just come natural, that you want to go in and you want to jump in and help and you want to do this. And then the other big challenge I see is because there's good days and bad days and good times in the bad days and bad times in the good days. But so when is it appropriate to help, and when is it too much help, and when is it not enough help, and when do you don't help at all, and when and that's the hard. That's the kind of a little bit of a tightrope that I think we all walk.
I think I had a little bit of insight into that because Chuck's mother had Alzheimer's disease and his mother's mother had it as well. And we watched as Chuck's father did everything that he could to keep her comfortable and happy. Everything. So she just decided not to do, to sit back and let him do everything. And when he was first diagnosed, we said, this is not the way we're going to operate. We're going to do this as a partnership, and I'm going to do as much as I possibly can for as long as I can, and I will not let myself just vegetate. But I think the fine line is in finding, sometimes, it's like old times, like you were first married, and this disease is not here. And then 10 minutes later, the disease is there. So my biggest problem was trying to figure out, or get out of the denial phase and say, I'm going to enjoy this time that works and is cogent and all that, and then I'm going to just step back and say, disease is here. It shows its face sometimes, and sometimes it does not show its face, and that's something we have to learn to deal with.
Yeah, it's confusing for our spouses as well as for us, because I know that first year, James would have such good days, and I'd think, I wonder if they were wrong about that.
Right,
He is doing so well. And then the next day I'd think, oh my gosh, he would like run red lights and that kind of thing. And I would think, oh, what are we going to do? And it is hard that you think that it's going to be like this with dementia, but it's not. It's like this. And that takes a lot of getting used to.
You talked about being discombobulated and how your previous profession has not been particularly helpful.
Oh, mercy. It's embarrassing. I don't want people to know. Well, here I'm announcing it, and I say I don't want people to know, but of all things, I was a therapist, and it's so embarrassing. I mean, really, I would be embarrassed for anybody to know if they saw me sometimes. She was a therapist, because I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. I say things I wish I hadn't said, and you would think with my background that I would be a little more aware and better trained in knowing how to deal with some of the challenges we face, but I have really messed up sometimes. And then the other thing is that I'm much more, I guess I could say maybe this is good, but I'm much more in touch with my emotions. When you're a therapist, you say, and how did you feel about that? You know? And instead I'm like, oh, and I'll burst out crying over something. And I do think that this process we're going through has helped both of us. James would probably agree with me. We're much more operating from our emotions and not as much out of our heads. And that's not all bad. It's just a different way for us.
You know, another thing that we face is that I think it's family and friends that we've known for so long that a lot of times that we think are going to be there, and they actually, I don't know whether they think this is catchy or something, but they jump back, they distance themselves, and that's a hard thing. But by the same token, then there's others that you didn't realize how close they were, and they rise up. And I guess that's one of the, you know, challenges, reward type things, is that you have friends that you didn't know you had, and you have family members that, you know, you think family is close, and some disappoint you, and others absolutely rise to the occasion, and it's just absolutely phenomenal.
What bothers me a lot is that over the years, I've had friends in the past, you know, would say, well, Chuck's fine. He seems fine to me. I don't know what your problem is. He seems fine. Okay, just come spend a day or 2 or 3 with them, and then talk to me.
Yeah,
but a lot of friends used to do that.
I've had the same thing. People come up and they'll say, well, he just seems fine to me, and I want to
Totally
say,
normal.
you are not living at our house. And even James would tell you that. In fact, he'll be able to speak for himself this afternoon, but he says it diminishes how hard he's working to appear normal.
Right.
And so...
Yeah, and I don't think, it took me a long time to understand that, so I'm sure not going to put that onus on anyone else, but they, you know, I know Chuck works hard, and he steps up to the plate when he needs to step up to the plate.
That it's confusing for others.
It is confusing for others.
And people mean well when they
Yeah,
say
they do.
that.
Oh, yeah.
They think they're making us feel better. Actually, what would help more would be if somebody says, tell me how you're doing. How are you really doing? That, at least for me, is more helpful than, oh, he seems great.
Oh, I've got 2 friends sitting right here that always do that on a daily basis. I am so fortunate.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I think sometimes they're not comfortable, especially as friends and family, that you thought were close, and they're not comfortable because things aren't maybe just the same, or, you know, the repetitious stories or whatever it is. And I say they're not comfortable because they're not around enough. Spend more time with us. Love us like you should. And you know, I think we're the same people. It's just,
yeah, it's hard for other people to go with the flow like we do because they're not around it very often. So.
Right. I mean, it's very common to see particularly adult children who live far away find it very hard to accept the diagnosis. And the longer they stay away, the less involved they are, the stronger the denial can grow. And anxiety too, so it's very complicated.
Sure. You know, a 2, 3, 5-minute phone call is not the same being there.
Yeah, we went through that. My daughter and her husband live in California, and when we first told them the diagnosis, they were just sure we were exaggerating the symptoms, that maybe we were imagining things. And it's very hard when they're on the other side of the country and they're only here, you know, a brief amount of time, or they only talk on the phone to James for a little while. It was very hard. But at the same time, I tried to be understanding because even though my daughter is his stepdaughter, she adores him and thinks of him as her father. And, you know, that's a hard thing for family members to realize that their parent or their brother or sister is going to be dealing with this illness. It's very challenging. So I tried to be understanding, and yet it was very hard to have to deal with the denial that was going on.
It sets up the question of grief and how, because they already are anticipating, they don't want to know anything about this because they understand that there's going to be an experience of grief that comes with this. Can you talk a little bit about that grief and ambiguousness of the kind of grief that you live with?
It is a grieving process when you go through this because you lose so much. And for us, I think one of the hard parts for Laura and myself is that you lose the intimate little chatter that you have, the little things that you share on a day-to-day basis is gone. I mean, and it's not their fault, it's just the way it is. And like I went to tell Laura a story one time about, not that it was all that fascinating or anything. We were driving down a road and I saw a school and there were kids in the playground and I said, oh, look, they're out for recess. Do you remember recess? What was your favorite thing during recess? And she said, well, I don't really know. And I said, well, you know what we used to like to do? And I tried to share and she started digging through a purse and changed the subject. It was gone. I just wanted to share that little thought, but I couldn't. Mm-hmm. And that's the way it is. And it's those little things that we miss. And that's what I think is, it's that hard part. That's the hard part of marriage, because those little pieces just crumble away. And it's not a big chunk. It's not in a death where they're gone, but it's just little pieces that are missing. A little bit
at a time.
Yeah.
Right. What, did you want to say something?
Well, I was just going to say I don't necessarily feel grief. I feel sad sometimes. And then that gets to our coping mechanisms as to, okay, well, I feel sad and I'm feeling sorry for myself, so what do I do? And I don't know if you want to get into the coping stuff now.
Well, I just wanted to say one thing.
Okay.
Behold that thought. I think it's important to, one thing that you have all done is that I think ambiguous grief gets worse when it's not validated. And not many people understand what that is that you're experiencing, the slow. So to have people come to you and be with you in that experience, whether it's other people who are going through it or support groups, I would imagine, are very important to you because they can validate the experience.
Or just family or friends that will listen.
Will be there, right? Because it's really hard to live that without people getting it and having it validated. So I just wanted to say that for the group.
While we're on the grief topic, one thing that has helped me a lot with kind of a mixture of grief and anger and frustration is writing. And that's just been such a good outlet. I don't know if any of you have tried doing that, but James does it as well. But to just write down the intensity of the hurt or the pain or the loss or whatever it is. And it kind of shocks me sometimes when I go back and look at it later. But I feel so much better after I do it. And then I'll either email it. I know I've emailed to Jane or to Mary, or I've read to the Silers things I've written, and I've read a lot of it to James. It really does help, and he does the same with me. But that's a good way of, like you say, validating the anger and the grief rather than just hoping it'll go away, because it doesn't.
Right. And so that's a way of coping.
Yeah, and I'm really lucky. I get a lot of validation through my friends, and they all are they're here for me and for Chuck. And we live in a community. I hate to be Pollyanna, but I'm so grateful and so happy about this community. But everybody, and it does take a village. Everybody knows, and Chuck walks around a lake. It's a 2-mile walk, and most people in the community know that he has dementia, and so they all watch out for him. And they invite him, they call him specifically, invite him to go to concerts or movies, lunch, while my girlfriends all take care of me. They're always asking me to go someplace with them or do things with them, and yet they're there for me to vent, and they always validate my feelings. So I'm really lucky there.
You are very
but
fortunate.
another catharsis for me is exercise too. So I get the two of them, and I feel a lot better with both, because I didn't have any of this before I came to Biltmore Lake.
Yeah, I got to share what these guys were saying. Funny story. we were sitting around talking about coping, and they said, they get away and they go go to a hotel for the weekend. They said, you ought to do that, Bill. You ought to call up one of your friends and say, let's go to a hotel for the weekend. I said, hello? Guys don't even go to the men's room together. I'm sure not going to call somebody up and say, hey, you want to go to a hotel for the weekend? Doesn't work. It doesn't work.
Well, we were laughing about it because we do that with our
We do,
girlfriends.
yes.
And we just have so much fun and just laugh and laugh. But it really was good that Bill made that point because it made me more sensitive to when the male is the care provider. And it's not as easy, I think, for men to get support, especially if they've gone through life not having close friends. Now, some men do. They have guys they go hiking with or that kind of, or go fishing with or whatever. But I do think it's harder for men, generally speaking, and I think we need to be sensitive to that and give the guys more of a chance to have places to vent and talk about what they're going through.
Well, we're going to run out of time. We could talk for hours and hours, but I wanted to ask you to share. You had such wonderful things to say about guilt, how each of you deal with guilt. Three different ways. I think it's important to say them. So, Linda, you were saying you don't feel guilty.
You can start with me.
Yeah, you don't feel guilty.
I don't feel guilty. I feel remiss, and I feel as though I probably should have done something a little differently, but it's not going to change what I did do. I will apologize if I think that it's something that, but guilt is, to me, a wasted emotion. It's just like worry. You're in a rocking chair and you're rocking back and forth and you're doing something, but you don't go anywhere. It's not productive. And I told myself a long time ago, I'm not gonna feel guilt.
And then Bill said,
Well, I do. I feel guilty a lot, but I try to learn from it. I think it's good if it's a learning experience, because there's some stuff you feel guilty about, like why did this happen to Laura and not to me, or whatever, and that is wasted guilt. But when I snap, when I've reached my frustration level, and I snap back at her, and geez, then I feel guilty. And I apologize, but I learn from it. I try to extend, my patience a little bit longer or whatever. But if you look back on it and think about it, I say a little prayer, and I just move on and try to make sure that I don't do that again, or my fuse is a little longer, or whatever the case may be.
right, and Cannon, you talked about learning to let a lot of things go.
I have had to learn through this experience to just let it go and not make such a big deal about things. And not to, I'm like, Linda, I don't feel so much guilt as I live with a lot of regret. Why did I make that choice? Why didn't I do this? And through this process, I've just learned a lot of it. It's not worth getting so fired up about, which kind of relates to something else we've talked about, and that is how this illness, it almost forces you to live in the present and not focus so much on what you wish you'd done differently in the past or what you might have out in the future ahead of you, because really none of us knows whether we have a dementia diagnosis in our house or not. So I've learned to just let things go, try to live more simply, and try to live more in the now. And James is doing a good job of teaching that to me, of living more in the present. And in a way, that's kind of a gift with this illness.
Right. So I love that Linda said, I'm doing the best I can. I'm not going to be guilty because I'm doing the best I can. And Bill says, I'm learning. I'm using the guilt to turn it around, to learn from Laura what's happening. And Cannon says, I'm learning to let it go. And I think these are three wonderful pieces of education for all of us. So can we talk a little bit about the rewards of this as we come to a close? So would you share some of the rewards?
I'll jump in and just say that my reward, and although it does sound trite, is there's something about, especially when you're a care partner, your spouse, your loved one, your one and only, is going through something like this. I think it, and I don't know how to say your love increases, and I think Mahan alluded to it, and it's true. When you go through any type of trial or tribulation, and I love the word the crucible, we're in the crucible, when you go through that, it just takes the love to a different dimension is the only way I can describe it. And I can't say that I love her more. I don't know if that's possible, but I love her in a different way. And you know, she's just an incredible lady, and I definitely married up, and I will always be.
One of the biggest gifts for me with this has been it's just opened up a whole new circle of friends. You know, we've gotten to be dear friends with Jane, and then Pat and Mary, who facilitate the group I'm in. I know I could call either one of them if I needed help over something, and I have done that. Our support group, there are 4 women in our support group, and our husbands have all been in the early stage group together for years now, going on 3 years. And we get together once a month, and it is so wonderful. One of them's here, I know, Lorraine, but we know we can say whatever we're feeling or thinking or whatever's going on, and the other the other women there are gonna understand, because they've either been through it or they're going to go through it. So you do develop friendships and relationships that, well, we would not be here today if it weren't for this, and I'm very grateful for it. And I do think, Mahan touched on this, but I think it really helps all of us if we do try to keep a sense of gratitude, not in a Pollyanna way, but just there are so many things. Well, you're the one who said.
Oh, I'm Pollyanna.
Yeah, you said I don't want to be Pollyanna, and you're not. But you know, the fact that memory care is here and that medications are here, and that there is so much help available in terms of friends and places and all. I'm very appreciative of that.
Yeah, and Linda,
Oh gosh, let's see, I'm thankful for so many things. I guess I'm learning more about myself. And I think that's very important. He's always allowed me to be who I am, and sometimes I didn't like who I am. Well, now I really like who I am because I recognize the core is there, the goodness is there, the kindness is there, and that will always be there.
Right.
And it's just something that I'm very, very lucky and fortunate to have.
and you talked about how you've become so much stronger
I have.
in your life as a benefit of this.
Oh, I have.
as
I was a
reward.
wimpy little girl.
Old
that
and
Don't think so.
Anything else to bring?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that it's really, although we're sitting on the stage, it's really not about us. It's really about our spouses. And because I like to say, I'm just the taxi driver here. You know, the truth is, it's my wife, it's your husbands. It's really that we're along for the ride, more or less, but we'll just try to do the best we can. It's really about them.
Well, to pick up on what Mahan introduced, I think this will make me cry, but we're all holding on to that thread, and it's that connection with the not just the one we love, but in our marriage, but with our friends and family, our bigger family. That thread's going to get us through this.
Wonderful, thank you. We thank you very much for being here with us today.